Hello, Mike Kako, and good afternoon. Mahalo for joining today's AEN hearing. It's Wednesday, March 4th, 2026, and we're convened in room 224, and also video conferencing, which includes audio and video remote participants that's being streamed live on YouTube. So in the unlikely event that this hearing is cut short, the committee will reconvene to discuss any outstanding business on Friday, March 6th at 3 p.m. during AEN's time slot, and a public notice will be posted on the legislature's website. So we have 4 GMs today, governor's messages, and we'll start off with governor's message 615, submitting for consideration and confirmation to the Advisory Committee on Pesticides, gubernatorial nominee Matthew Liam for a term to expire June 30th, 2029. First up to testify is Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity. Yeah. Hello, Sharon.
Chair Gabbard, Vice Chair Richards, Member Rhodes, Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture Biosecurity, standing on our submitted testimony in support of Matthew Liam. The Pesticides Branch appreciates his service in the past year and would greatly appreciate your confirmation of his second term. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Christy Martin with CGAPS.
Aloha Chair Gabbard, Vice Chair Richards, Member Rhodes, Christy Martin, Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species, CGAPS. CGAPS is in strong support of Matt Liam. We've worked with him for a number of years on the Landscape Industry Council of Hawaii board. He's been a board member for a number of years. He's currently the president and doing great work with that organization, increasing awareness. He's also the co-founder of Performance Landscapes, one of the most respected landscape companies in Hawaii. And recently retired from that. So he's got time on his hands. You should put him to work some more. So please support his confirmation. Mahalo.
Thank you, Christy. Next is Brian Miyamoto from Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair. Brian Miyamoto on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on a written testimony in support.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else wishing to testify on GM 615? We have 11 in support and 0 opposed and no comments. And let's see. And is Matthew here? Online?
He is here,
Yes,
Chair.
I am. Yeah.
Okay, there he is. Aloha. Matthew, would you like to make a statement?
No, just I appreciate you confirming me or testifying for me. I'm not sure I need that much work, Christy, but thanks for that last comment. I am willing and able to help more, so I appreciate it.
Okay. Members, any questions for Matthew or for the testifiers?
Yeah, good for Matthew.
Senator Richards.
Thank you. Mr. Liam, thanks. Really appreciate you throwing your name in the hat. Understand you need a lot more work since you're now retired. So talk to me a little bit about Australia, you're consulting down there.
Wow, that was a long time ago. My degree and my first part of my career was in aquaculture. So I managed shrimp farms on Molokai and Kahuku. And I got hired to consult for a sheep station down there that was getting into aquaculture.
Okay. And I see you went to school at University of Washington.
Correct. Go Dogs.
I'm a Cougar.
Oh, sorry about that. We're both Seahawks fans, I hope.
Actually, you handled that response quite well. No, I appreciate the concern, and I see you have a restricted use pesticide license. That is a area. How do you approach that when it comes to the use of restricted pesticides? Because reading through your resume, we have to balance between use of pesticides and non-use of pesticides. So what's your approach on that?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, in 25 years running my landscape company, we actually didn't use any restricted use pesticides. I went for that license primarily for the education side. And I applied the protocols applied to restricted use applicators to all my pesticide applicators. including EPA handler and worker training, logging every pesticide and fertilizer that we use, location, if appropriate, EPA registration number. So I actually tried to avoid, and I did avoid using restricted use pesticides for landscaping, but I used all the practices that they required.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Anyone else? A question, Matthew. What are your thoughts on the pesticide buffer zones around schools, parks, and healthcare facilities?
I think that would be, from what I know of it, is it only restricted use pesticides or all pesticides? Do you know what the buffer zone includes?
I'm not 100% sure, but just just in general.
In general, I would depend on the location of the school to whatever the nearest facility is that is requiring the use of the pesticide, what the pesticide's for, what pesticide it is. I'm getting my house tented, in a month, and I would be, I'm not near a school, but I would be bummed out if I couldn't tent my house because I was in a buffer zone. So I guess it would depend on the circumstance.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And moving on to the next GM, it's GM 616, submitting for consideration and confirmation to the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity gubernatorial nominee N. Young. The term to expire June 30th, 2029. And first up is Dab.
Thank you again, Chair, Vice Chair, Member Rhodes, Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture, Biosecurity Chairperson. Regarding N. Young, I've had the pleasure of knowing N for a few years, but he has been in decision-making roles for 18 years. And he's one of the few nominees or member of the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity that would have experience with Lanai Agriculture. He served on as general manager for Sensei, and since then, their product has been appearing in all the supermarkets, and the packaging is really quite nice. So he's done a good job with Lanai Ag. He's also got experience at the Food Basket on the nonprofit side. Food safety is big, and he's got experience there. So I guess what I'm saying is Pacific Gateway Center is part of his resume, and he's now with director at Kamehameha Schools. His experience is vast and deep and statewide. He would be a really good, he has been and will continue to be an asset to the Board of Agriculture Biosecurity. Greatly appreciate your consideration in confirming him as a member. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Next is Brian Miyamoto, Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, Member Rhodes, Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We have strong concerns that his term is not long enough. We absolutely support it. And in fact, I was just going to stand, but hearing the chair talk about Sensei Ag and Food Basket, our testimony references Kamehameha Schools, and he's doing an amazing job with institution purchasing, Pacific Gateway. And I serve with him on the City and County's Ag Task Force. That in itself is just broad background that we need for Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity. So I want to come up here and show our strong support for Mr. Young to continue the great work that he's doing. And the Farm Bureau is in strong support of this nominee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next is Nicole Galassi from Hawaii Cattlemen's Council on Zoom.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Nicole Galassi on behalf of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. We support this confirmation. Mr. Young has proven his ability to contribute meaningfully to the board in his first term, and he has a wide breadth of knowledge about agriculture and its supporting industries in Hawaii. Mahalo.
Thank you, Nicole. Anyone else wishing to testify on GM 616? Okay, do we have Mr. Young on Zoom?
Nope, we have him in the
Oh, it's
room.
right here, okay.
Because I comb my hair, I think, huh? Chair Gabbard, Vice Chair Richards, Member Rhodes, good to see you folks. I did submit a written statement. You know, your guys' job is to vet us, so I'm more than happy to be here for you folks to answer any questions and give you a chance to kick the tires.
Okay, members, any questions?
Yep.
Oh, here it comes.
It's just kind of funny because Ed and I are friends, so I know you, and talk to me a little bit about a sensei on
Sure.
Lanai, because I'm curious about that. And one of your statements in there was you were able to do things quickly to scale because you had the financial backing to get it done.
That is true. You guys may know that Lanai has a single owner with quite a bit of capital. And, you know, he wanted to get things done. And so it's not necessarily that budgets went out the window, but, you know, for us, we were given a real opportunity to dream the big dream, you know, lay out exactly what that would take. And, you know, just use his name, Mr. Ellison, he's a businessman as well, right? So, you know, he held our feet to the fire. We put together a scaled hydroponics plan. I mean, I think still it's the largest in the state, and the only farm that, you know, didn't really grow organically in terms of not organics, but growing in terms of, okay, you know, I started with 1 acre, I moved to 2 acres, I moved to 3 acres. You know, we went full bore, you know, straight to scale. And that was made possible not only through the support of Mr. Ellison, but you know, really the support of the community looking for an alternative to hospitality, for sure. So, you know, that ability to move was facilitated by capital, for sure. You know, without the money, you can't do it. But really, you know, there were these a number of other elements that came together to be able to move that project forward.
The reason I asked that, what it caught my interest was we collectively as government, sometimes nonprofits, award grants to get somebody started. But I've always worried that we give them enough to sort of break the ice, but not enough to be successful.
Yeah.
And so they don't fail because of lack of interest or lack of good idea, but we undercapitalize them, which is almost a slow death. And so Board of Ag, you got programs, grant programs. How would you approach that given your experience?
Yeah, I think it's two-sided, right? So, you know, on the governmental side, and, you know, I've been in government, right? We try to run lean. And, you know, there's a certain set of strings that come, you know, attached to whatever that funding is. You know, on the private side with Mr. Ellison, obviously those strings were different. They're still present, but they're different, right? And making sure that, you know, in a capital stack that has private funding, government funding, and maybe some debt or those kinds of things, that those strings don't get in the way of each other, and stop that money from really facilitating the outcome we're trying to get to. And then I think, you know, on the farmer side as well, you know, a lot of us, I think just personally, we don't like to take on debt, right? So it's kind of running lean on the funding side. Think that running lean mindset on the funding side, but also on the folks who are getting the capital. They're afraid to ask for that operating expenses. They're afraid to ask for a cushion, you know, to run their business, right? They think like, oh, all I need is this tractor, and, you know, all of a sudden is, you know, the world's going to open up. But, you know, as you guys know, farming 1 acre is not like farming 2 acres, is not like farming 5 acres. You know, it's not double the work, it's 6-7 times the work, right? You know, labor, once you start getting employees, all those things. So, you know, it needs to be two-sided. One, on the government side, you know, do we have employees that have farming experience that are going to understand where the wiggle room is, they're going to understand the business model and be able to help, especially new farmers, understand that, you know, maybe your assumptions should be a little larger, right, in certain areas. And if not, then how can we incentivize or train our workers to have a little bit of that? And then on the farm side, it's really, you know, making sure that they understand when they do receive the funding, one, what the strings are, what that allows them to do operationally, and really get them to a place where their business model is going to work within those constraints. Yeah.
Okay, follow up. Sure. You got your MBA at Scheidler's. Years ago, Jay Scheidler and I were talking, and he asked me to explain to him agribusiness, business in agriculture. And after we talked for a little while, he said, so what I'm understanding is agriculture is your way to get rich real slowly. Given that MBA, do you see how we can accelerate income streams in agriculture?
Yeah, I think so. My general goal, now that I've been exposed to kind of that world of technology and understanding a little bit more about what how we can apply different techniques to agriculture. So, being a Hawaiian and also being a KS is understanding. There's intensive agriculture and there's extensive agriculture, right? And so extensively, what are the natives? What are the crops? What are the crops that are going to support habitat for our native birds, our native bugs, or all that kind of thing? Because that's also a biocontrol, right? And then on the intensive side, all the things we want to eat that are not from here, lettuce and tomatoes. I forget what I told Robbie Alma. I told him a number of years ago. Really, lettuce and tomatoes are invasive species, right? And they're taking up space that things that could do better for us here could occupy. And so on that side, trying to intensify those crops with better technology, decreasing the footprint and increasing output at the same time. I think those are good high-paying jobs, right? And then on the other side, we reduce on the extensive side, we reduce our outlays for those biocontrols. We create those conservation jobs and we get people back on the land, right? So that's the overall goal piece. And then in terms of supporting acceleration in ag, some of the crops are orchard and stuff like that. It's going to take time, and it takes time to rebuild your herd,
Right.
And that kind of thing. But there are ways. Financial instruments, forward contracts, those kinds of things have been used for years in other industries, right? So if it is an issue of cash flow, to the farmer and having that as an accelerant, I think there are financial instruments that we're playing around with. We played around with at the food basket using SNAP. And some of the other federal funding streams to try to get those monies into the hands of farmers that we're still playing with, right? Double bucks.
Yeah, I was going to say the double bucks thing that you worked on. That.
Yeah. So I think that the tools are there, and we've been trying a bunch of them for a while. So it's a good time to go mainstream.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay. So, Mr. Young, what is from your perspective, how can the board help strengthen Hawaii's food security?
Oh, well, there's a myriad of ways, for sure. I think
Start from the top.
Yeah,
okay?
I think the highest level one is really making ag land productive, right? And I think, for all of us, we understand what ag is not. When we go and say, well, this guy's on 5 acres and he's got 1 horse, right? That's not ag. But we're having a harder time saying what ag is. And I've seen some of the bills floating around saying, okay, DAB is going to be the arbiter of what bona fide farming is. And that's a sticky conversation. But our responsibility as board members is to represent the public, go out there, continue to listen, continue to see what folks are doing, bring that to the board, and make room not only for what is there, but for some of the newer models. And then Brian mentioned we're on the city and county ag task force, and they're looking at real property assessment and what are the enforcement tools that we haven't been using to disincentivize that. Because I think, if we're making productive use of all our ag lands, we'd actually be in pretty good shape.
Okay. All right, anything else? Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to GM 617, submitting for consideration and confirmation to the Board of Ag and Biosecurity, gubernatorial nominee Jason Moniz for a term to expire June 30th, 2029. Okay, first up is Dab.
Good afternoon again. Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture Biosecurity Chairperson. I've worked at the department for 20 years, and that is nothing like the amount of time that Dr. Moniz has worked there. He started off his career as in ag as a state president for 4-H, moved on to other roles of agriculture importance, and retired in 2022 to go back to his ranch. And we were lucky enough to tease him out of retirement to come back and serve us as the veterinarian that he is and bring that knowledge to the board. Ranching, the knowledge that he brings, especially with the disease side, is so vitally important today. It's almost essential. Just got an email today that the 5th case of screwworm was found in Mexico, 5 new cases. And someone with the experience that Dr. Moniz has is essential to keep the board apprised of the impacts of what would happen if. So with that, I would greatly appreciate again if the AEN would then consider confirming Dr. Moniz as a member of the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And by the way, on the last one, on GM 616, there were 7 in support as far as testifiers, 0 opposed, and 0 comments. Moving on, Brian Miyamoto, back to GM 617, Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, Member Rhodes. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. It is our pleasure to offer our strong support for the confirmation of Dr. Moniz. You heard the chair talk about his background, and he has the background. As a veterinarian, 30 years with DAB. He's got the experience. 4th generation agriculturalist, currently a rancher. He's engaged. You heard her mention 4-H, but also Hawaii Cattlemen's Council, and even the Hawaii Farm Bureau. He's very thoughtful in decision-making, and he's not afraid of hard work. I think he's a great nominee. He'll offer his skill set to the board. And on a personal note, Dr. Moniz has been very engaged in the recent Act 90 deliberations and our efforts to get those DNR lands over to the Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity. He was one of those lessees. He was one of those leases. Once this was transferred, he didn't stop. His efforts were even doubled. He wants to see all his other fellow ranchers and agriculturalists. So again, his efforts are for the industry as a whole and not for himself and his operation specifically. So again, great candidate, great skill set, and we are in strong support of this nominee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Brian. Nicole Galassi from Hawaii Cattlemen's Council.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Nicole Galassi on behalf of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. We offer our strong support for Dr. Moniz. He provides a valuable skill set to the board as a veterinarian with decades of experience with the department. I noticed that so much of the testimony in support of Dr. Moniz mentioned these decades, which makes it sound like he's long in tooth. But in my experience working with him, I've had to stretch to keep up with all of the work he does. Transportation, animal health and well-being, getting donations to the community when it's needed. In his role with the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council right now as vice president, he's shown his ability to thoroughly work through issues and opportunities. And throughout this, he holds the ability to represent the industry as a whole, even as he's a generational rancher himself. I actually could not dream up a better candidate for this board seat. Mahalo.
Thank you, Nicole. Anyone else wishing to testify on GM 617? Okay, we do have 29 in support, 0 opposed, 0 comments. Dr. Moniz.
Chair Gilbert, Vice Chair Richards, Senator Rhodes, thank you for considering my nomination to the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity. I presented my resume and you had asked some very probing and interesting questions, and so I'll stand on those responses. I got 4 areas that I just kind of wanted to highlight that are pretty important to me going into this, if I do get selected for this position. And they're pretty broad, and but yeah, it take a lot of effort and going forward. First one is preserving ag lands and water resources. That is has been huge throughout my entire career. Ag doesn't survive if we cannot have the lands to farm and ranch on, and water resources. Improving and strengthening our biosecurity. I worked in that area for my entire career, and we have to do a lot better job than what we've been doing to keep some of the pests and organisms out of the state that have raised havoc with our agriculture and our environment. We need to ensure our farmers and ranchers are afforded conditions which allow them to be successful and sustainable. Sometimes we got rules, regulations, policies in place that make it pretty tough on farmers and ranchers to succeed. And having walked in their boots for the past 36 years as a rancher, you understand how some of those things are just not working. We need to get some of those things fixed. And then the last one is to increase food production in Hawaii. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are on board with that, and I've been on board with that for a long time. So those are 4 areas going into it that I intend to focus on 2 years down the road, 4 years down the road. Those things may change, but I don't think those 4 would disappear, so.
Okay.
Anyway.
Members, any questions?
Yeah, Chair.
Senator Richards.
Yeah, and again, Jason and I have been friends for 40 plus years. Worked together in a lot of capacities. Jason, you made a comment specifically that kind of piqued my interest in your questions. Strong, resilient advocate for agriculture, and Department of Ag and Biosecurity has often taken a sort of a back seat, but you said, don't expect me to keep quiet. Expand on that, please.
Yeah, the department's always kind of been little sisters to other departments, Department of Health, Department of Land and Natural Resources, and so forth. And I mean, if we all say we want to support agriculture, we can't just say it. We got to follow up and give them the support that they need. There's a lot of times I'll look at situations like, my whole career trying to battle bovine tuberculosis on Molokai. And everybody gets real interested when there's an outbreak, and then the support and the money just kind of goes to the side after a while. And we can't keep doing that to agriculture. We gotta give them the support they need and sustain that support.
Well, and I appreciate that. And you and I have been on the same side of many, many arguments over the years trying to get things moving forward. One thing that was brought up in here was potential conflict of interest, and I appreciate you upfront disclosing it, and you too, and same deal. Hawaii is a small community. Hawaii agriculture is smaller. Yeah. We all know each other. And so I appreciate the fact just putting it on the table will continue to function going forward. but we're not going to hide anything. We'll just tell you this is our relationship. So, anyway, I appreciate it, Jason. And this is an easy one for me because you and I have worked together for so many decades. So appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Moniz, after leading the Animal Disease Control Branch in DAB for 3 decades and continuing to operate your own ranch, what motivated you to step into a broader policy role?
To be truthful, some arm twisting. But yeah, kind of put my money where my mouth is. And, I won't say I have the broadest background in all of agriculture, but there are some areas that I have a lot of experience in. It'd be kind of a shame to just walk out towards the sunset, although that was the plan. Hasn't worked out real well, but yeah, boots on the ground as a producer, important in policy making to see things from that side. The biosecurity, the education, continuing education, I'll probably be the strongest board member in that area. Yeah, and then as a lessee on a state lease for 30-something years, you learn a lot about how those leases work and don't work. And so I'd like to have some input in that area also. So it's kind of key areas. Whenever we've had disasters in the state and there was a need for food to be supplemented, it was always a no-brainer for me to try to get the industry to step up and participate. And the last one, I think, was Lahaina fires. And I expect to participate in that from the board standpoint, from the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council standpoint going forward, to make sure we shouldn't only be disasters where we step up. I mean, if there's there's need, we should have some sort of ongoing program that makes sense for the producer and for the consumers out there that need the help. So, all right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else, members? Okay, let's move on to GM 680, submitting for consideration and confirmation to the Board of Ag and Biosecurity Group Board nominee Michael Fay for a term to expire June 30th, 2030. And we start off with Dan.
Chair Gabbard, Vice Chair Richards, Member Rhodes, Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity Chair. While I do not have the same personal relationship with Michael Fay, I have met him. He's taken me up on a tour in a helicopter to tour the water systems of Kauai. The man knows a lot. He can tell you that the amount of gallons that's flowing through this system, what it was doing 10 years ago, what it's doing today, and why it's doing what it's doing. So he has a encyclopedic knowledge of Kauai. Looking at his resume, the man is born and raised on Kauai, and Kauai is everywhere in his resume. He has served Kauai he has a life of service to the Kauai community, so it makes sense that he would be the Kauai member to the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity, representing the interests of Kauai agriculture. If you just look down, he's just done so much for Kauai, and currently with the Kikaha Ag Association, he is a strong advocate. If you were to pick up the phone right now and call him and say, you know what, I want to go see such and such on water system or field, he would be more than happy to take you there, and he would give you the who, what, where, when, why. He is so knowledgeable. He's just, wonderful for Kauai. And I would, again, greatly appreciate if this board would, if this committee would confirm him as a member of the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity, representing the county of Kauai. Thank you.
Very, thank you, Sharon. Anyone else wishing to testify on GM 680? Yes, please come forward.
Hello, Chair, Vice Chair. Senator Rhodes, Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. Apologies, Chair, if you don't have our testimony. Okay. The Hawaii Farm Bureau is in strong support of Mr. Mike Fay. We echo many of the sentiments that Chair heard. It said, as an example, nearly every time we bring somebody to Kauai, be it somebody from our CODEL, your colleagues here at the state legislature, or anyone, Mike Fay, Kekaha Ag Association is somewhere we always visit. And the wealth of knowledge, as you see in his resume, in our testimony about Kauai agriculture, which will translate to state of Hawaii agriculture, it is immense. It's great. And again, another skill set that he can bring, Kekaha Ag, working really closely with ADC and the work that they've done on the west side of Kauai, I think is invaluable and can bring a lot of background and resources with his background to the Board of Agriculture. Again, another, we believe, great nominee that can bring some different skill sets and diversity to the Board of Agriculture, because agriculture is extremely diverse. So again, Hawaii Farm Bureau is in strong support of Mr. Mike Fay's confirmation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have 30 in support, 0 opposed, and 0 comments. Members, any questions?
Somebody online.
Oh, who's that? Oh, there he is. Oh. Hey, Michael, would you like to make a statement?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, Senator Rhodes. Yeah, my resume is strong on Kauai. I've worked all the islands, however, in various capacities. I've got 3 or 4 points that I'd like to make. You know, I grew up in sugar. Let me, by the way, obviously you're not from Kauai, so you're pronouncing my name a little bit wrong. It's pronounced Faya, kind of like the fire engine. But, you know, I grew up in sugar when sugar covered a lot of land. Kekaha sugar, which has been kind of part of our DNA, was once considered the most valuable asset the territory of Hawaii had back in the 1930s. And, you know, what it looks like today is a shadow of itself. I think what agriculture in Hawaii today is a shadow of itself. So kind of one of my goals is walking kind of in the footsteps of my forefathers, is to, you know, return agriculture to the importance that it was at one time. We've got too many acres of good farmland that is fallow. So that's kind of one of my goals, is to get into any kind of agriculture, you know. That's number one. I think another very important thing, it was touched on by a couple of the other nominees, but we have a tremendous investment in infrastructure that the plantation built, and very little money is applied to it. And I can speak to that, you know, running Kekaha Ag for the last almost 8 years now. You know, we ask, and you know, we just don't get the money. And then you wonder why, you know, we struggle. So, you know, I'll be looking at getting more investment into that before it's too late. We've got tunnels and things and such that if we don't start slip lining them soon, we're going to lose them. Another thing that I think faces the neighbor islands that the board needs to help with is the cost of freight and just the logistics of getting freight. If you look at the farmers farming in the on Oahu, you know, they'll get a bag of or a bunch of banana, you know, cut the hands off, put it in a box, put it in the back of a pickup truck, and next stop is Costco. When you look at it coming from, say, the island of Kauai, it is like vastly different and costing probably 10 times as much. ADC and KAA, Kikaha Ag Association, have been looking at for example, I've been looking at reopening Port Allen as an ag shipping point. And, I'd really like to explore the idea of ag cooperatively owned freight service to get freight from the neighbor islands to Oahu productively. And then, of course, the biosecurity thing is just so huge, and we can talk about it and moan and groan, but I really think we need to be ready for the next, whatever comes next. And do we have contingency plans? Do we train for when a brown tree snake falls out of a plane at PMRF? Are they ready? Is the community ready for us to take some pretty drastic actions to control this? So I think those are the four areas that I'd like to work on and see progress in Hawaii. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Members, any questions?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Faya, your comment about the irrigation systems and need for upgrade and maintenance, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm most familiar with the ones in Kohala. Your thoughts. We had a briefing where we're thinking probably somewhere around 150 million to take care of the ditches statewide. What's your opinion?
I think that would be great. I think we should lean on, there are a lot of experts still around in the state. Try to get their input. People like myself, I've got ditchmen who are 80 years old that are still working and have a huge amount of knowledge on how the systems work. On our ditch system, I know people who work on systems in your area, on the Hamakua and Kamoala systems, the Kohala ditch. I think it would be great. I want to see it. I'd like to make sure that the money is spent judiciously on actual shovels in the ground instead of administrative and studies after studies and such like that get burnt up. That scares me. We at Kikaha Ag, we're a nonprofit agricultural cooperative that the farmers support, that are ADC tenants on the Kikaha, 12,000 or so acres out there, and acting as a private organization, we can really make the dollars go far. And my point is that I don't want to see it wasted on unnecessary expenditures.
Couldn't agree with you more, and I look forward to talking to you more about that. One other question I had, you talked about the agritourism side. Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, I see there's a bill floating around right now. Actually, I think you guys are looking at it, about agritourism, that we have to have like a ongoing agricultural entity before any agricultural tourism can be had or performed on ag land. Again, area that needs, I think, some more discussion. For example, at the Kikaha lands, we've got, as I said, 12,000 some odd acres. Of that land, only 9,000 are tillable acres. The rest are gullies and hillsides and things like that. And can we put those to use? The plantation did it with trying to run cattle up there, but to be honest, they never made any money. But can we do some appropriate electric bike tours up there, bike paths or something like that, that'll just help supplement the ongoing cost of maintenance of farmland. You know, once you spend that $150 million, some of that we got to maintain it, you know, afterwards, and for the next 100 years we got to maintain it. And I just believe that more agritourism will just help the agricultural industry here in Hawaii.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your thoughts. I also agree with your thoughts, so thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Faya, you had mentioned biosecurity in your comments, and you mentioned the brown tree snake. What are the largest threats for the entire state biosecurity, and then also specifically for Kauai, in your view?
I think one of the biggest things statewide is the lack of education the general community has about it. When we have these things, I was on the Environmental Council back in 2005 or 4, sometime around then, when the Koki frog first came in, and we were supporting the idea of applying a citrus-based chemical on them when it was contained. But, you know, somebody in the community says, no, we don't want to do that. It's, you know, the special reptile from Puerto Rico or something. I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can, you know, allow that to stop something that's going to be a statewide problem. And so therefore, I think that the biggest problem is lack of education and understanding of the community. I think we need some outreach on that, explaining to people what we got to get done with these invasive species and get them, you know, 100% agreement, or even if not 100% agreement, that we're going to need to take action to get them addressed quickly. And that goes with as I said, I think a critical reaction team, you know, that'll move quickly into when the next threat comes up, that we can attack it quickly at the root. So I think that's statewide. What specific species is next statewide? I don't know what the next one is. Hopefully I'll learn more. Kauai, I think we've got two. One, I mentioned the brown tree snake. The other one is, I believe Kauai is the only island that is not affected by that, the bee, that species that's attacking the bees, or the problem with the bees. And we're the only island that is exporting bees. And I think that's critical that we keep Kauai isolated from that as well, so we can yeah, and of course, you know, we keep our eyes out for the mongoose, you know, all the time. So specifically for Kauai, I think those are the three that I'm most concerned about.
Okay. And do you believe that the inter-island quarantine measures that we have currently are sufficient?
No. I think more could be done. Okay. We ship construction equipment back and forth. I've never seen, well, I've seen a little bit, but I think it could be better handled. You know, maybe even the small scale, you know, 1 or 2 officers with dogs walking around the ports would be helpful. I think there's small measures that could be taken that could have big impacts.
Okay. Okay, members, any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Faya.
Thank you.
Okay, members, I don't think we need to go into decision-making in terms of gaveling out. You're all good? Okay. Good. So we'll start at the top with the GM 615 on the considering Matt Liam on the advisory committee on pesticides. So the chair's recommendation will be to advise and consent. Any discussion or comments? Chair votes aye then. Vice Chair.
On Governor's Message 615, Chair's recommendation to advise and consent. Chair votes aye, Vice Chair votes aye. Senator DeCoit is excused. Senator Rhodes.
Aye.
Senator Awa.
Aye.
Chair, you have 4 in favor. Motion is adopted.
Thank you, members. On GM 616, for consideration and confirmation of N. Young to the Board of Ag and Biosecurity. Chair's recommendation will be to advise and consent. Any discussion? Chair votes aye. Vice Chair?
On GM 616 for Mr. Young, of the members in attendance, are there any with reservations? Any no votes? Chair, you have 4 in favor. Motion adopted.
Thank you, members. On GM 617, for consideration and confirmation of Jason Moniz to the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity. The chair's recommendation will be to advise and consent. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair?
On GM 617, Chair's recommendation, advise and consent of the 4 members in attendance. Any voting with reservations? Any no votes? Chair, you have 4 in favor.
Thank you very
Motion is
much.
adopted.
Thank you. And then on the final measure, GM 680, for consideration and confirmation of Michael Faya to the Board of Ag and Biosecurity. The chair's recommendation will be to advise and consent. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair?
On Governor's Message 680, of the 4 members in attendance, anybody voting with reservations? Any no votes? Chair, you have 4 in favor. Motion adopted.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members, and thank you for stepping forward to serve.
Thank you.